All right, good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jill Nogaris, and I am the K-12 English Coordinator in the Office of Humanities at the Virginia Department of Education, and we are thrilled to have you with us this evening. Thank you for joining us for the first night of an 8-part conference series where we will explore best practices for English instruction here in Virginia. I'm joined this evening by our middle school specialist, Colleen Cassida. Many of you are also familiar with our elementary English and reading specialist, Carmen Curick, who is currently out on maternity leave. So she hasn't gone missing entirely, but the three of us have worked extremely hard to put this conference together for you all, and we're very excited to have you with us this evening. Just already, we had a couple of technical difficulties. So if you could please just note on the screen, we were hopeful to use the Q&A option, the chat feature streaming on YouTube, and we've had a little bit of a glitch. So I have included 3 different email addresses to which you can send questions as we are moving forward this evening. If you have questions for the presenters as we are listening to them speak tonight, we will be able to monitor that email and get your questions over to the presenters after the general session so that they can kind of handle them as we are moving forward. So please just take note of those 3 email addresses. If you're interested in contacting any one of us, we will happily help you the best that we can. But before I move on, Colleen, would you like to give a welcome?
Thanks, Jill. Hi, everyone. We are so excited for this series, and we are excited to kick it off tonight with our K-2 teachers and really highlight some best practices. And so I just want to thank everybody for being here, and we are just thrilled.
All right, thank you, Colleen. And I am minimizing things, so I'm hopeful that if anybody sees anything going wrong, they will let me know. But before we even start, we cannot let this evening go by without thanking all of you who are here. The simple fact that you're here at 6 o'clock on a Monday night in August demonstrates just how dedicated you are to your students and to lifelong learning and to bettering your practices. So we just want to thank you. We know that this certainly has been quite the tremendous lift over the past 18 months. And we are just absolutely thrilled that you would take this time to just learn and grow with some of the best and brightest that we have here in Virginia. We are just so thrilled to be able to highlight some of the instructional practices that are going on all across the Commonwealth as we feature different educators across the Commonwealth through this K-2 experience. And then, of course, as we move to 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So we just want to thank you for joining us. We hope that you're able to get something from this that you could implement in your classrooms tomorrow. I know some of you are already back with students, and I know some of you are spending the last week of your vacation with us. So we are just so thrilled. So we want to take a couple minutes and just kind of show you how the K-2 session is going to work. I know that the video that was playing when you all signed on kind of highlighted all of the presentations that will happen over the next 7 nights after this. So just wanted to highlight what you can expect in your first 2 nights with us. All right. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the K-2 English Language Arts SOL conference presentations, starting with a DOE general session, which is what you're sitting in now. We will stop 5 minutes before the hour every hour to provide a restroom break for you to get up and stretch, take that phone call, whatever you need to do. At 7 o'clock, though, we will be looking at redefining balanced literacy in primary classrooms with Ellen Frackleton and Tamara Williams from the Williamsburg James City Schools. And then at 8 o'clock to 8:55, we will be checking out the 3 F's: phonemic awareness, phonics, and facing facts about how we learn to read with Dr. Jennifer McSweeney and Savannah Campbell down in Gloucester. Tomorrow, if you'll see, it is not a repeat of tonight's session. So we were really trying to give you the full and complete experience that you would have if we were able to do this in person, by giving you the same amount of PD and the same amount of time to network and learn from one another as you would have if we had been able to be in person during the day. So tomorrow night will feature two different presentations. 6 to 6:55 is It's All Fun and Games, Phonemic Awareness with Carrie Liesma and Nicole Ball from Fairfax County. And 7 to 7:55 is Reflecting on Reading with Liz Ross and Maureen Hauser from Hampton City Schools. And that is just our K-2 feature. Obviously, we have the other 2 nights dedicated to 3-5, and then next week begins our secondary push. So just wanted to point out that it is not a repeated session. But for us, it's an opportunity to annually highlight some of the instructional best practices that are evident in your divisions so that they can be shared with a broader audience and impact instruction all over the state. So again, our hope is that from attending tonight and tomorrow, that you will walk away with strategies that you can immediately implement and ideas and best practices that you can share back in your PLCs and back in your schools. We realize that not everybody in a school division can be present, so we are counting on you to serve as ambassadors and to bring this information back to your school division to share these best practices. All right, this next slide is extremely important. This is how you access tonight's resources. So what you have here is a QR code or a bit.ly, whichever works best for however you are viewing this. If you are on a computer and you want to click that bit.ly to access the Google folder with the materials, feel free to do so. And if you are wanting to open them up separately on another device and you want to use that QR code, please feel free to do so as well. I do want to let you know that we are recording tonight's presentation so that it can be posted on the VDOE SOL conference website. So if you are viewing this in the future as a recording, please note that this Google folder will not exist anymore because the materials reference will be found below this link. They'll be all there on the webpage for you. But if you are joining us tonight in the live event and you want access to the materials that our presenters are going to discuss, you will want to use either the bit.ly or the QR code to access the materials. And I hope that I have given you enough time that we can confidently move forward with tonight's session and everyone feels like they had the ability to get to the materials. Let's do a little countdown in my head and we will move along. Okay, so we really want to think about what literacy instruction looks like after the crazy 18 months that we've had and what our goals are for teaching literacy, especially to our youngest learners. We have spent a lot of time brainstorming and thinking about what has happened with our youngest learners. Some of them have delayed starting school. Some of them continued with school and continued down a path. Others jumped ahead because they had so much extra time at home and possibly additional supports that we find ourselves in a situation where some of our youngest learners, the range of their current skill level is so broad that we have to think about how we are going to implement what we know as best instructional practices and kind of move forward with instruction in our classrooms this fall, understanding that we serve and are responsible for every student who sits in our classroom. So when we think of how we're going to look at tonight's session, we're going to talk about addressing literacy instruction using a comprehensive approach. Then we're going to talk about supporting early literacy using evidence-based practices and what that means and what that should look like. We'll also discuss the focus on essential skills in everyday instruction to address some of that unfinished learning, and then also kind of walk you through where you can find some of our Virginia Department of Education resources and guidance to support you as you move forward with your students this fall, whether that be right now or 3 weeks from now. But either way, we are marching forward. So how can we do this the best way possible for students? So the first thing we're going to talk about is comprehensive literacy. As you know, the standards of learning are written for each grade level, and they are written by strand: communication and multimodal literacies, reading, writing, and research. And so when we talk about literacy and we talk about a comprehensive approach, we want to integrate those things as much as we possibly can so that students can see how these pieces go together to have a more complete understanding of everything they read and see and do and write as they go through their K-12 education. So the first thing we want to talk about is what this approach should look like. We like to discuss in the English office that probably one of the easiest ways and the most comprehensive ways to get at this is to have a thematic unit planning approach to instruction. And when I find myself in conversations with our secondary counterparts, I very often applaud this group first and foremost. Our K-2 teachers probably most naturally take the thematic unit plan approach, whether that's by topic or by question or by season. Maybe we're talking about penguins or pumpkins or community helpers, whatever the case may be. You all do such a fabulous job of incorporating all the different pieces that go with that this comes most naturally to you. But when we're thinking about thematic unit planning for this fall and how we might scaffold and support our students who are coming from such different experiences, given our current circumstances, we want to think about how we might tweak some of that to fit the needs in our classrooms. So we want to think about topics that interest your students and your community. What is relevant to them? What is going to get them engaged and interested in the learning? And we're really lucky when you think about English language arts because we are so skills focused that we don't have specific titles we have to teach or a specific order in which to do things. So we have the opportunity to explore our students' interests and find materials that we can still teach our same skills with using engaging topics that will really cause our students to question more and learn more and really dig in deep to their learning. So if we do this comprehensive approach to literacy and we're thinking about a thematic unit, we have the opportunity to include some student choice. And that doesn't mean wide open choice. It can still be within a controlled setting, but it allows us to offer students some choice in what they read or in what they research or in what they write about or how they write about something, which allows us to integrate those 4 different strands together instead of students seeing each of these in isolation. It allows us to spiral those essential skills, bring in that background knowledge, and focus on Virginia's 5 C's. When we think about texts, though, text can mean so many things in a K-2 environment. But what I really want, if there's something you take away from this slide that you hear me say tonight, it's that with the push that we find ourselves in to make up for some unfinished learning, and we're thinking about that we need more time reading and we need to focus on literacy, I really caution you from taking away from your science and your history time in order to do so. We have such an amazing opportunity to highlight history and science and the texts that we would be covering if we were having history time or science time, and really folding those into our literacy instruction so that our students have those rich experiences, because those are the kinds of pieces that they're going to grapple with later on and ask questions about and need to learn so much more about nonfiction as they move up through the grades. So I really caution you from spending too much of your literacy block just on reading, stories and stuff like that. We really need to fold in that missing history and science and all of those contents that make literacy rich for students. So just wanted to say that, we have an opportunity here, and as we're worried about losing some of our instructional time from content areas, we can bring some of this material into our literacy block. But it's also important because those texts that you're using provide common understanding and background knowledge for students who have such varying experiences and life experiences, that this provides that common background knowledge that's foundational to our literacy understanding and our understanding of the world. We also have the opportunity to scaffold for future comprehension with our youngest learners as we're learning about language acquisition. And it also provides us an opportunity to explore different people, cultures, and traditions beyond our own life experiences. So when we're thinking about a comprehensive approach to literacy, we really want to make sure that we are providing our students with a variety of texts. We also want to consider student-driven research. And yes, research, the strand starts all the way down in kindergarten. And are our youngest learners writing research papers? Absolutely not. But our youngest learners are really keen on asking questions. So if we can harness that curiosity and that energy and teach them about asking questions and finding out how we might find answers or who we might talk to get answers, that, you know, there are sources out there, that there are experts we can talk to, and we can do this as a class, then that allows for student engagement as they're thinking about what they want to learn. So for them to understand that it's an ongoing process and not something that we just do every March or every April, but that we are naturally curious people and that we write down our questions and we seek out answers, which hopefully lead to more questions and more answers as well. So just this idea that we want our research to be student driven, to engage our students, because then they feel some ownership and then they will want to read more and write more about it as they go. Then we want to think about self-expression through communication and writing. And writing can be a very vague term when we're talking about, say, kindergartners. But that writing could be discussion, it could be drawing, it could be a scribble that they explain to us. But it allows for reflection before, during, and after reading, and allows students to see that we think about what we read and we write about what we read, and that these things work together. It also offers us the opportunity as educators to model thinking and writing and to teach them about how we can provide feedback and ask questions based on what they've shared, and that we give them a variety of writing experiences and a variety of purposes for writing so that they see this as something that an active learner participates in. It's not just a culminating activity at the end of something, it's something that is ongoing that we're doing. And the last thing that I want to talk about before we switch over to best practices to support early literacy is this slide right here. I really like to talk about this slide and, you know, kind of just have you think about the different bullet points that are on here. Because if we're going to talk about a comprehensive literacy approach, and we're going to talk about meeting our students where they are and what their needs are and scaffolding understanding, but making sure that we are offering rigorous instruction and giving them professional writing to read, and that we are hitting the standards of learning, but also being relevant and providing time and text and allowing for performance-based learning, then we have to acknowledge that we actually need both sides to balance one another out. When we spend too much time on one side or the other, we are not serving our students in the best way possible. We need to provide opportunities for students to have grade level text and to grapple with more distinguished writing that maybe is a read aloud that you are explaining to them. It's very important that we have intentional text selection and that we are hitting our standards of learning. But if all we do is focus on that one side of the scale here, then we are not honoring and supporting the students in our classrooms who need a few more essential skills and foundational skills that might have been missed. However, if we spend all of our time over on the other side, only looking at, you know, student choice of what they want to read, or they may not push themselves, or we only focus on materials with which they are currently able to understand, then we are never pushing them back up where they need to be successful moving forward. So when we talk about comprehensive literacy and we talk about supporting our students moving forward with all of their needs in the various situations that we find ourselves in, we need to make sure that we are intentional about trying to balance out both sides of this equation here. So we really need both sides for our students to be successful as much as they can moving forward. It isn't just rigor and it isn't just student interest. We need to be offering our students applications in both. So I just kind of leave that for you to think about as you're moving forward. We're going to switch over to thinking about these best practices to support early literacy. And in doing so, I want to make sure that we include some of the research that we have on all of this. We always like to talk about foundational literacy and using what's out there as expertise. And what you see here is a practice guide, which is published by What Works Clearinghouse and the Institute of Educational Science. And what they do is they examine different studies that are out there and they make recommendations based on the evidence from the studies. All right, the recommendations are ranked in order from strongest evidence to minimal evidence. So if you were to look at this specific one on foundational literacy, for foundational skills to support reading for understanding in kindergarten through third grade, you would see these 4 recommendations. Recommendation 1 is to teach students academic language skills, including the use of inferential and narrative language and vocabulary knowledge. So supporting the development of specific academic, inferential, and narrative language skills will broaden students' listening comprehension skills, which will prepare them for better reading comprehension. It also expands their vocabulary knowledge and syntax within the English language. Recommendation 2 focuses on developing an awareness of the segments of sound in speech and how they link to letters. So to effectively decode, which is to convert from print to speech, and encode, which is converting from speech to print, to encode words, students must be able to identify the individual sounds or phonemes that make up the words they hear in speech. Name the letters of the alphabet as they appear in print, and identify each letter's corresponding sound. This recommendation presents ways to support the skills, such as teaching students to recognize and manipulate segments of sound in speech, teaching students letter-sound relations, and using word building and other activities to link student knowledge of letter-sound relationships with phonemic awareness. And then recommendation 3 is teaching students to decode words, analyze word parts, and write and recognize words. This recommendation presents several ways to implement decoding and analyzing word parts. The first way is blending sounds with spelling patterns from left to right to produce a recognizable word. The next is providing instruction on common sound spelling patterns. Is it explicit and systematic? Also continuing this instruction even as students move into learning syllables. So as we get into upper, second, and third grade. And then recommendation 4, ensuring that each student reads connected text every day to support reading accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. This recommendation states that students should be reading a wide variety of connected text daily with and without constructive feedback. As students are beginning to apply the alphabetic principle, text should provide examples of recently taught spelling patterns with support and feedback from teachers on applying decoding strategies learned. This recommendation also shares some suggested strategies for supporting students in other ways. So I say all this because tonight's session is really going to focus on a lot of these foundational literacy skills, but I want you to know some of the research behind it. And you can find this when you see this presentation and have access to it in the IES practice guides. So what we think about when we're talking about phonics and what research says about phonics, the short version is these bullets. It should be explicit and systematic, that it addresses readiness skills, has a scope and sequence, blending dictations, and the other column. But to kind of explain that a little bit more, what does explicit and systematic even mean? So explicit phonics instruction means that the letter sound relationship or skill is directly stated to the students. The sound is represented by the letter S. We actually tell them we are explicit about what we want them to know. This is not a time to guess. This is for us to explain to students what we want them to know. Systematic means that the instruction follows a continuum that moves from easier to more complex skills. Strong alphabet recognition and phonemic awareness are readiness skills needed for success in reading. Knowing the names and sounds of letters with fluency and being able to orally blend, segment, and manipulate sounds and words from kindergarten moving up to grade 3 will be the biggest predictor of early reading success, which you will hear more about as the evening goes on. A strong scope and sequence moves from easier to more complex skills and builds on previous learning. Blending. We teach students to segment out sounds in order to decode words, but students must be proficient in blending those sounds back together in order to sound out words. Students must be proficient with blending orally before using it in text. Blending is used with early readers, but should continue as students transition into multisyllabic words. Dictation. Students must be provided opportunities to try out or apply their phonics skills with teacher support, just like the IES guide discusses practicing phonics skills with connected text. Literacy blocks should consist of opportunities for students to analyze and notice patterns in words through tasks that require students to manipulate words to increase students' abilities to notice larger chunks in monosyllabic and multisyllabic words. Word building and word sorting are 2 examples of word awareness tasks. High frequency words are known as the most common words in English. Words that follow regular sound spellings can be learned and applied during the normal phonics scope and sequence. These are words that do not need to be explicitly taught to students. And back to reading connected text. I'm sure you are seeing a theme here. Students should have opportunities to practice and apply phonics instruction in decodable text. And building background knowledge and vocabulary. As older elementary students encounter more complex text and vocabulary, providing a balance of phonics instruction with best in practices with vocabulary acquisition and expanding background knowledge is essential. So as you're reflecting on the practices in your literacy block, you might want to consider how you implement some of these characteristics. Is this often? And if you are, say, a building administrator, how often do you see this within your building? And what changes might you want to make, or where might you want to emphasize more time? So what does this look like if you are seeing it in instruction? You should see students engaged in conversations about text and prompts for students for more details and more complex grammatical structures. You should see instruction and teachers modeling, asking and answering inferential questions, the use of decodable texts in your classroom, using sound boxes to do word building activities, and modeling and practicing blending, chunking, and sounding out. Some ideas of instructional practices that teachers might use with students would be to place your hands on your chin and pay attention to the number of times a student's chin moves up and down as they say words slowly, and several other examples that you see here. So these are just some ideas of what you should see if teachers are following these instructional practices in their classrooms. But switching over to writing, because writing is a very important part of our literacy block, and to be honest, an even bigger part, an important part of our reading block, because our students should see reading and writing connected together. They should be reflecting on their reading in writing, and they should be writing about what they're reading and reading about what they're writing. Like, they should see the 2 go hand in hand. So we do have for you today another practice guide that examines elementary school students to be effective writers, how to do that and what that looks like. So again, this is another piece, another IES practice guide. But as you can see, they very much advocate, remember, looking at the evidence base, looking with the top evidence to the end here, we see that the first recommendation is providing daily time for students to write. All right, so the guide here actually recommends that at least 30 minutes a day in kindergarten are set aside for teaching the skills, strategies, and processes for writing, as well as an hour a day for older elementary students. 30 minutes of that for instruction, and then 30 minutes for student writing. It also suggests that some of the student writing time could also occur within another content domain, such as writing a lab report for science, or having students write about what they're reading about and reflecting on something that happened in their story. Recommendation 2 is teaching students to use the writing process for a variety of purposes. This recommendation shares many strategies for engaging students within the writing process, from picking ideas and organizing all the way to sharing, as well as strategies for writing for different purposes. Recommendation 3 is teaching students to become fluent with handwriting, spelling, sentence construction, typing, and word processing. And I can't emphasize enough how important recommendation 3 is. When young students begin to write, they scribble, and then they'll tell you an entire story about what that little scribble means. Could be chapters, all right? Because they have learned that what I write stands for what I think, and they're sharing their thinking with you. However, as they get older, they're working to express their stories and ideas on paper, as well as use their developing spelling knowledge to identify the sounds they need to express those ideas. They have 2 jobs here. And if they haven't developed fluency with their letter formation, then the ideas they want to express begin to change based on the letters and the words they do know how to use. So they will simplify their thoughts so that they are capable of writing down what they are thinking. And then the way they express their ideas begins to change, and they adapt. Their print no longer acts as the symbol for those ideas because they don't have the capability of doing that. So handwriting is not only essential for letter learning, but for fluency with this, and it's essential for expressing ideas. But as students grow older and begin to express their ideas in a variety of modes, we need to implement practices daily so that students have the opportunity to type and use word processing skills, again, with the same understanding in mind, that we want them to feel that they can type what they are thinking and not adapt what they are thinking to what they can type. And then recommendation 4 is creating an engaged community of writers. So there are a lot of examples in here about the teacher acting as a writer, providing choice that would engage students to be in a community of writers, how to collaborate as writers, how to provide feedback and work with a peer, and then multiple ways to publish student writing. So all of this is included in this effective writing IES practice guide that I encourage you all to take a look at. So thinking about what that best practice looks like in a classroom, you would want to see time set aside for teaching writing, for time for students to engage in writing tasks, and time to reflect, for students to reflect on what they are reading. We want tasks that model and engage students in the writing process and give the gradual release of responsibility. We also want to teach students how to construct different types of sentences and provide choice and options, and to share teacher writing so they can see you as a writer as well. So as we're thinking about instructional practices that we want to use this fall, here are a few that would really engage our students, that are evidence-based and really back up what we're trying to offer for our students as far as scaffolding and support and the opportunity to move forward this fall. Speaking of which, I do want to, and this is actually hot off the press, share with you all some updates to PALS, because this is mostly the PALS crew here today. On August 6th, which was Friday, so today's Monday, this is hot off the press, we shared Superintendent's Memo 217-21, which is regarding future updates to the phonological awareness literacy screening. As you all know, COVID-19 has had a significant impact on early literacy learning in Virginia. And so when we look at PALS data from spring 2021, it showed that significantly more students, 1.8 times as many, ended the school year at high risk for reading difficulties as compared with our spring 2019 data. Because if you recall, we did not have spring 2020 data. Moreover, the data show that literacy learning of students who are Black, Hispanic, English learners, or come from low-income backgrounds are disproportionately identified as at high risk for reading difficulties. So please understand that the PALS K-3 screener identifies students at risk in early reading, and this guides the allocation of EIRI funding to support early reading intervention in school divisions. So the Virginia Department of Education is collaborating with the University of Virginia PALS office to actually revise and expand the state-supported pre-K 3 to 3rd grade literacy screener. Revising the state-supported screener is necessary to align Virginia with the current scientific evidence base and for consistency with contemporary measures of early literacy and reading development. Updating the literacy screener will provide a more comprehensive understanding of individual student learning needs. So the updated early literacy screener will provide a battery of reading screening tasks that will include subtests that examine phonological awareness, decoding, encoding, oral reading fluency, processing, speed, and rapid automatized naming, just to name a few things. And while this is brand new information, the PALS office could not be with us this evening, but they did pass along a few slides that will kind of hopefully highlight for you some of the upcoming changes. All right, so in order to bring PALS pre-K, PALS kindergarten, and PALS 1 through 3 into alignment with research on the science of reading, there are many revisions and expansions taking place with PALS. So here's some of the information about those revisions. Regarding the different assessments, PALS will be adding language tasks, revising existing tasks, and expanding to include an Espanol version. Additionally, PALS will expand downward to 3-year-olds, adding vertical alignment so that growth can be measured. So piloting will begin this fall in 2021, and they expect to have the revised assessments to be in classrooms by fall of 2024. So to get into a little bit more depth, if we talk about the current PALS assessment, we're going to use this diagram here to kind of support this conversation. So let's look at the changes in a bit more detail, starting with the current PALS assessments. We know that a comprehensive approach to literacy instruction is grounded in the simple view of reading, which is what you see right here, as shown in this figure. Decoding and encoding, linguistic comprehension, and fluency support the ultimate goal of reading comprehension. However, you can see just decoding and encoding and fluency are the primary focus of the data that the current PALS screens for. With the robust revision of PALS, they will have a screener that is in alignment with the research of the science of reading. All right, and let's hope that all my clicks work well here. In pre-K, they will assess the following domains, and you can see the focus falls within the graphic here. Print concepts, alphabet knowledge, phonological awareness, rapid automatized naming for the 4s, emergent writing, and oral language. In kindergarten, alphabet knowledge, phonological awareness, rapid automatized naming, decoding and encoding, vocabulary and language. And then in grades 1 through 3, we will hit phonological awareness, rapid automatized naming, decoding and encoding, and oral reading fluency. So here's another way to look at this. So to look at it another way, see how the tasks will be piloted in each of the assessments as they move across the grades. So you can see for 3- and 4-year-olds what they will cover in kindergarten and the changes that you will see in 1st and 3rd grade. And I leave you with this PALS contact information. They do have some updated information there. And if you are interested in learning more about the spring 2021 data, that superintendent's memo links to their key findings. It's a very brief, maybe 2-pager to kind of support some of what you're doing in your school divisions, and you can find some information here as well. But this is an ongoing project that just got started. And like I said, we will be piloting starting this fall in anticipation of a full revision by the fall of 2024. So if you have any questions specifically regarding that, you can visit the PALS site for more information and to contact them. Okay, now we're going to switch over to talking about essential skills and instructional practices. First of all, we always like to highlight this article. What's the best way to address unfinished learning? It's not remediation, study says. So we cannot take our second grade class and spend the first half of the year teaching first grade and what students might have missed. If we spend a half of a year covering material from the previous year, we will never get where our students need to be. So we want to talk to you about scaffolding instruction moving forward to support your students in a way that will spiral and will make sense for students, but will allow them to keep going on their journey. So what you see here are what we would expect to see in K-12 instructional practices. So this is a K-12 slide that talks about what instruction should look like when we're looking at the essentials for reading, writing, research, and communication and multimodal literacies. What we would want if you told us that we had to take everything that was in reading K-12 and put it down to just a few bullets, what are the most important pieces? This is what you would find. And as you can see, we are a skills-based subject area that spirals and that you really can't cut anything out of because it all ends up being important skills to understand. So what you'll find is even as you're reading a pared down version, it's very comprehensive of everything that would have been in a grade level standards of learning document because it's so important for our students to know all of this material. The next slide, though, gets at what we would want for our students in K-2 if we had to pare down and talk and discuss only the essentials of reading, writing, research, and communication and multimodal literacies. But as you can see, even still within each of those bullets, they're pretty heavy. They're heavy hitters. You know, for students to use phonetic principles and sight word vocabularies to put ideas and thoughts on paper. Well, as you can see, yes, we're talking about writing here, but we're also talking about that reading and communication piece in order to do that. And what you will find is there are very few skills in English where one content doesn't rely on another strand. So we want to think about how we can maximize our time with students to make sure that they are getting all of these things, even within a condensed version of instruction. So if you wanted to look at this material more in depth, the Virginia Department of Education does have a site that's called Virginia Learns Anywhere, where we talk about addressing unfinished learning and what that might look like in language arts. And as you can see, we have put these together by grade bands because you know, we're going to find that our students fall more in grade bands, even within a specific grade level. We will have first graders who are closer to third graders, and we will have first graders who are pretty much at almost a preschool level in terms of the experience and the knowledge that they bring into school. So we try to bundle these and put them together in grade bands so that it would be a little bit more cohesive of what you might find in your classroom this fall to support these students and scaffold instruction around them. So if you were to go to this site and click on this material, you would see there's even a QR code how to access this PDF and this material and what the essentials are for English language arts instruction. It isn't a situation where we can say, you know, you don't need to teach 2.4 C, D, and J this year. It doesn't work that way in English language arts, especially because our materials, the books we read, the poems we look at, the writing pieces that students do, they don't fall that way. We're in a very passage-based system where a lot of times we're teaching whatever is evident in the piece. So to try to cut material out doesn't really work, but this gives you a more condensed and concise version to look at what's essential in English language arts instruction and where you might want to spend a lot of your time. So what you see here is just a piece of that, another screenshot from that. And what you'll see is we have taken those essential understandings for each of the strands that we have listed, and they look like tires. I think they were originally bubbles. What you see are different color circles, we'll just say, that are attached to that specific strand, because as we all understand, you can't really successfully do communication and multimodal literacies without bringing in the reading, the writing, and the research. So we've pulled over an essential understanding from each of the other strands to just depict for you how you might put some of these together. And it's just an example, just to get your brains going as you think of how instruction might look this year. And again, here is the other side of that with the research and the writing. And we do have these available for the other grade levels as well, but wanted to specifically point out the K-2. Additionally, with that same material, we have updated our instructional log. So the one that you see here is an example for grade 2. And this piece would work really well for at the building level. What you see here is an example, just a screenshot of part of the reading strand for 2nd grade. And there's a column where that 2nd grade teacher could write down that they feel, yes, that skill was sufficiently covered during the 2020-2021 school year. Or they could mark it as, you know, I didn't get to it the way that I would have if we had been in person, or my students might need a little bit more help with this, or we just didn't get to it. They could check it off here. And then what you see is where that same skill or a piece of that skill may show up in the following grade. And the reason that that's there is for that 3rd grade teacher to have a clear understanding of when he or she gets to that piece of that skill, whether or not their students have any understanding of it at all, or where they might need to scaffold and spiral in some of those 2nd grade standards into that 3rd grade. We don't stop everything and go all the way back to 2nd grade, but we find ways of incorporating some of those lower level Bloom's verbs into the 3rd grade material, because at the end of 3rd grade, they still have a grade 3 assessment that they are responsible for. So we need to find ways to spiral some of that understanding in. We also have available several VDOE supports and resources is kind of the last section of our time together before you actually get to be with the complete experts on tonight's conference, our instruction and our instructional experts out in the field. Just to highlight a few pieces from our website, though, we do have a whole section called Learning in Place, where we have bumped it again by grade band, where you can find materials and websites that are available. And what we've done here is we have shown you what strands they hit or what they cover. If you are looking for additional materials to share with parents, for students to go home and do some extra practice with, or even just to use in your classroom. So what we have done is we've put these Learning in Place texts and resources. We have some offline materials available there too, just to kind of support and enhance your toolbox for the 21-22 school year. Additionally, we have over 100 comprehensive instructional plans posted, and the QR code that's here will just lead you straight to that page on the DOE website. And we've screenshot here just a piece of a section where they are listed by strand, and then within the strand, each of the grade bands. So this one is just demonstrating under the word knowledge and vocabulary section, we have these K-5 instructional plans posted. So you could look at an instructional plan on segmenting and blending, or long vowel patterns and vowel teams, so that you can get some ideas that you could potentially use in your classroom. And you do not have to use these instructional plans in their entirety, and you could take pieces or graphic organizers or just some of the structure of the plans and utilize them in your classroom if you see fit. All of the reading materials do incorporate reading texts, where we have linked free accessible reading texts, but that doesn't mean that you need to use the pieces that are there. You are welcome to go out and use whatever text suits you and your students, but could possibly use the structure of what the plan is inviting you or encouraging you to do. So thinking about the key features that are there, you will always see a primary strand listed and then the integrated strands, because again, we don't teach in isolation. And I don't know about you, but I've been in many, many schools where, you know, your administrator wants you to write your SOL up on the board. And I really feel like English and reading teachers could probably write 17 up there and really not be lying, because we do cover a lot in one class block and in a discussion, but in reality, there is something specific that we're trying to teach. But because all of our materials are skills based, it's so easy to scaffold and spiral in some of those other pieces that we think we need to include them all up on our lesson plan. So what you'll see here is how these strands are integrated and the essential understandings of what we want our students to learn from this skill and the essential knowledge, skills, and processes. And so you've got that primary SOL and then the ones that are reinforced within the plan, and then includes the materials that you would need. There's also a section for academic background or academic language. So this is really helpful to start with a common ground for your students where everybody can have the same background. So it gives you an idea of what students might need to know or what you might need to pre-teach before you start the instructional plan. There's also a lot of supports in here for English language learners and what academic language might be missing from their working vocabulary so that they can be set up with confidence to be successful in this plan. Then there's an entire section on student and teacher actions. So really, if I were to do this plan, what should I see students doing? What is the teacher doing? And it gives you step by step to support teachers and students as they pull these to use. It also includes assessment, whether that's diagnostic, formative, or summative, and what you might choose to do to assess the skills that you were targeting with those primary standards. And then it also brings in connection. So if it's a reading lesson, it might bring in a writing connection. If it's a writing connection, it might bring in a communication piece. How can I share my writing? It might bring in some research. How could I look and do something more with it? It will also offer extensions for your students who really are ready to take it a step further beyond what is expected in the instructional plan. But then it also incorporates some strategies for differentiation if you have some students who need some additional supports within the instructional plan. So like I said, we have about 100 of these posted, and every presentation that you hear over the next 2 nights will also include an instructional plan on the conference page, and then they will eventually be uploaded to the comprehensive literacy plan page as well. So those are all there for your use and to support you in instruction this year. We also have a section on professional development where you can go and search by topic and pull up different webinars or presentations that we have put together. As you can see here, we have some on early literacy, elementary reading, PAL supports, virtual or hybrid learning. So if you'd like to learn more, we do have those webinars and materials posted. I encourage schools to use them possibly in place of a faculty meeting or instead of a PLC meeting. And then if you feel comfortable doing so, possibly offering at your local division some incentive for teachers to kind of work through these and learn from them in the way of possibly earning hours towards recertification at the local level. Entirely up to you, but I find that that seems to work really well. And it's like we've provided a professional development offering for you to use within your division. Additionally, we also have a whole series of comprehensive literacy webinars posted. I think there are maybe 25 of them. So any of the topics that might interest you, you can check out that page and watch any of those. We also have the PowerPoint presentations there, anything to support you as you're creating instruction moving forward this year. I don't want to close out without making sure that everybody knows about a couple of conference opportunities that are coming out. The Virginia Association of Teachers of English, which is the state level affiliate of NCTE, our national organization, is hosting an in-person annual conference in October in Charlottesville. It'll be October 8th and 9th. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that opportunity and had the conference registration information. Additionally, the Virginia State Literacy Association, which most of you are probably familiar with, formerly VSRA, will be hosting their annual conference in March in Crystal City, Virginia. I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about Teacher Direct. If you haven't already done so, this is a mail service provided by the Virginia Department of Education, where once a week on Wednesdays, we send you, once you subscribe, information about what's out there for professional development, grant opportunities, scholarships for students, in any content area you're interested in. And then of course, it also provides information about superintendent's memos that might be important to instruction and all of that. It's kind of like sending a condensed version of our website straight to your inbox so that you don't have to go hunting for things. I also want to close out with letting you know that we are hosting our first family literacy night here at the Virginia Department of Education. It will be held Tuesday, August 31st from 6 to 9 p.m. We have a dedicated webpage for this if you're interested in any of the sessions. We are working and collaborating with our counterparts in the Office of Special Education, Family Engagement, Student Assessment, Equity and Community Engagement, and a few external partners as well to provide supports geared towards families of learners. So this would be really popular also for any public libraries, YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, just for us to rally around kids and see how we can offer support for the 21-22 year. So I'm sharing this with you in case you want to sign up. We'll be live streaming on 3 different YouTube channels that night, but also for you to share maybe at back to school night, conferences, so that you can share with parents how they might support their students and their young learners, K-12, moving forward for the 21-22 school year. I want to thank you for your attention. I think I only went over by 1 minute, which right now I'm pretty impressed with. So I want to leave our contact information up here. Myself, Colleen, Carmen, we all answer our own phones and our own email. So please feel free to reach out